I'm Nima Rajan. Canada's trade minister has headed back to Washington for more trade discussions. This is 2 weeks after accompanying Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on his trip to the White House. Mary Ng is concerned about a proposed tax credit for electric vehicles and Washington's plans to nearly double duties on Canadian softwood lumber imports. Softwood lumber has been a trade irritant between the two countries for decades. Canada has challenged the legality of the duties before and won both times. This was at Canada-US Free Trade Dispute Resolution panels and the World Trade Organization. The U.S. is about to implement new restrictions for Canadians and all other foreign visitors arriving in the country by air. As early as next week, those passengers will need to get a COVID-19 test no later than the day before their departure. The measures, intended to try to stop the spread of the OMICRON variant, do not include any changes for Canadians driving across the border. Canada is requiring all non-American foreign air travelers to get tested on arrival and self-isolate while awaiting the results. Legislation to ban conversion therapy for LGBTQ Canadians is now moving to the Senate. Yesterday, there were cheers and cross-party hugs as MPs unanimously adopted Conservative justice critic Rob Moore's recent motion to fast-track passage of the Liberal government bill. Justice Minister David Lametti thanked members of the Conservative caucus who he said exercised a great deal of leadership on the issue. He told reporters the Conservatives have done a very important thing for Canadians. RIDEAU Hall has been hit by a cyber attack. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity is investigating after the internal network at the office to the Secretary of the Governor-General, Mary Simon, was breached through unauthorized access. The office acted immediately to strengthen its network and has informed the Privacy Commissioner's office of the breach. Several young Canadians are taking the federal government to court to get rid of the minimum voting age. They argue denying citizens under 18 the right to vote in federal elections is unconstitutional. They say one section of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the right to vote for all Canadian citizens without an age qualification. The Canada Elections Act sets the minimum age for federal elections at 18. A study in the journal Addiction finds the expansion of overdose prevention sites in Vancouver led to immediate behavior changes in some drug users. Researchers with the BC Centre on Substance Use and the University of BC say about 6% more drug users entered addiction treatment, and the number of times users injected in public or shared syringes fell by nearly 3%. The study says the positive impacts should prompt other provinces and territories to open more of the services, which don't need federal approval. Manitoba's new premier is insisting even her own Conservative cabinet ministers aren't above COVID-19 rules. In a statement released by her office yesterday, Heather Stephenson says Infrastructure Minister Rob Schuller will be removed from caucus and cabinet. This if he isn't fully vaccinated against the virus in 2 weeks. Mr. Schuller is the only MLA who has not disclosed his status. This is ahead of a December 15th deadline for anyone entering the legislature to be fully vaccinated. The Durham Region Health Unit, just east of Toronto, is reporting a case of the Omicron COVID-19 variant. The news of Ontario's 5th confirmed case comes as Ontario's top doctor announced that anyone aged 50 and older can book COVID-19 booster shots starting December 13th. Quebec's public security minister says the province will begin requiring some domestic violence offenders to wear electronic tracking bracelets beginning next spring. Genevieve Guilbeault says the program, which will be rolled out gradually across the province, is designed to give victims a better sense of security and ensure offenders better comply with the conditions of their release. Quebec has experienced a spat of femicides since the beginning of 2021. With an unofficial count putting the number at 18. New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs says a title claim filed by 6 WOLASTOGEY chiefs could have a serious impact on the forestry industry and the provincial economy. The claim filed on Tuesday involves 60% of the province's territory and focuses on corporations such as NB Power and forestry giant J.D. Irving. The chiefs say those companies exploit resources on their traditional lands. The chiefs want the land returned, title to the entire area, and compensation for the use of the land for the last 200 years. All right, stay tuned. We'll be back after the break with a look at Black Friday, the stock market, and the Omicron variant. We'll have an interview with Brendan Caldwell, director of Caldwell Securities Limited, when we return. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. On the heels of Black Friday, markets turned cautious again yesterday, erasing an early gain and ending lower. This comes as investors try to handicap how much the new coronavirus variant will impact the economy. Stocks rose broadly in midday trading on Wall Street on Thursday as investors continue to monitor the spread of the new variant, as well as measures that the U.S. and other governments are taking to restrain it. Wall Street was already headed lower in the afternoon yesterday when the White House announced that the first confirmed case of the Omicron variant had been found in the U.S. Well, joining us now to talk more about how Black Friday and the new variant are impacting the financial markets is Brendan Caldwell, director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you, Nima. Great to be back.
So let's start with this stock market drop on Black Friday. You would expect the markets to react positively on Black Friday. So what is behind this?
Well, everything's on sale on Black Friday, Nima. Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? The day between Thanksgiving and the holiday and the weekend. So it's a semi-long weekend in the States. And but I think what you have to remember is that if you're in the office on Black Friday, on that Friday between Thanksgiving and the weekend, either your company or your family deeply and profoundly hates you. So, I mean, you're not there because you want to be there, and there aren't very many people there. So any bit of news that could take the market up or down is likely to be exaggerated simply because there are relatively few people trading, and thin volumes, very little in the way of back and forth, tends to exaggerate market moves. So with a bit of bad news that there is this Omicron variant, that hit the market, I think, disproportionately hard on Friday because everybody was so short-staffed.
All right, Brendan. Well, factoring in the Omicron variant, we saw a lot of market activity when it was first announced inside the United States. So should investors be particularly concerned about their investments at this time?
No, because one has to remember the market always shrugs off political news. What are you talking about, Brendan? This is a medical thing. It's not political. It's political. In as much as this, yes, it's medical, and yes, it's serious, and yes, this has been a big issue for the globe. But what I mean by political is 9/11 was a political issue, and markets at the end of 2001 were actually higher than they were the day before 9/11. So extraneous bad news that gets people riled up, whether it's elections or a terrorist attack or this new variant, I term as political. These are temporary blips on the market. If anything, to the extent that interest rates stay lower because of people are concerned about the economic recovery, that's going to have a net positive effect on the market, I think, anyway.
All right, Brendan. Well, considering all this activity on the markets, do you think investors should wait it out until maybe the markets are a little bit more stable?
No, because there'll never be a good time. Because I can tell you that one of two things is going to happen, Nima. Either the market's going to go up or it's going to go down. And if you wait and the market goes down, you're going to say, yeah, see, I was right. Well, it can go down more. Or if it goes up, you'll say, darn it, I'll have to wait till it comes back down again. The best course of action is dollar cost averaging. And whether you're talking $100 a month, or if you have $1 million to invest, starting with 100,000 of it, whatever your number is, start by putting a little bit of money to work, even if it's just 10% of what you intend to do in total. Because then if you put in a little bit of money, the market goes down, you can say, I can dollar cost average down. Or if it goes up, you can say, glad I did something, let's do a little more and see how it works out. And I can do a little more and I do a little more. If you don't do anything, it's so much harder to do the next thing. If you do a little bit, not so much that it's going to risk your financial well-being, but just do a little bit, you'll find yourself in a better headspace to do the next right thing.
All right, Brendan, some good advice. Just over a minute left here, but jumping to another topic, we're seeing a lot of CEOs of big companies step down. We saw Jack Dorsey of Twitter do so. What do you think is behind this trend?
Well, I think there's two things. One, there's the bigger picture, like Bill Gates from 20 odd years ago when he turned over Microsoft. There's comes a point when a founder can take a company so far, but not any farther. And it's time to turn on professional management. That might be a little bit of what's happening here, but I think part of also what's happening here is these big companies, Twitter, Facebook, now Meta, Google, I think they are dealing with a significant PR issue because of the impact they're having on the world and society as a whole. And I think they're looking to put a whole new face, whether they change their name in the way Facebook did or change their leadership. I think they're trying to reimagine themselves, at least in terms of the presentation to society and to the regulators, but I hopefully also changing the way that they do business.
The world continues to react to the emergence of the latest COVID-19 variant called the Omicron variant. Many countries are reevaluating their procedures at airports. Recently, Canada's health minister said the rollout of new rules at airports will depend on the capacity to immediately begin testing arriving air travelers. Meanwhile, as researchers continue to learn more about Omicron, the WHO warns that travel bans are having an impact on global cooperation efforts around the new variant. This is by delaying shared laboratory samples from South Africa, where the variant was first reported. Well, joining us now to tell us more about what we know so far about this new Omicron variant is Dr. Robert Hecht, Professor of Clinical Epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health. Doctor, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you very much.
Now, how does the Omicron variant compare to the other variants of COVID-19 that we already know about?
Well, there's still a lot we don't know about the Omicron virus. We do know that it's highly transmissible, and that's the most frightening, most worrying thing about it. We know that it's many hundreds of times more transmissible than the earlier variants, the Alpha and Delta, even the Delta variant, which has spread so widely. So this is a great cause for concern. What we don't know and what we need to find out as soon as possible in the coming days, we certainly hope, is how severe the illness is connected with Omicron infection. We don't know if a person who's infected is more likely to have severe illness and respiratory symptoms and failure and require hospitalization and face the threat of death. It could turn out that Omicron is relatively mild, even though it's very infectious. The other thing we don't know about it yet is how well the current vaccines that we have at our disposal will work to prevent breakthrough infections of the kind we've seen with Delta. We don't know how often that's going to happen with Omicron.
So there's lots to still find out about the Omicron variant, Doctor. Well, there is talk about implementing nationwide booster shots of COVID-19 vaccine to counter this. But how likely is this going to be our last dose of COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, we'll see. My colleagues and I have been anticipating that boosters would be needed for some time now, even before the first countries like Israel moved to the booster program. And here in the United States, where I live, where the program started out mainly targeted at those over the age of 65 and rapidly, as we expected, expanded to all those who are currently eligible for the first round of vaccine. So this was something we expected. We saw that the initial doses that people were receiving back in the winter and in the spring were starting to wane. And this is not surprising. We have this with other vaccines that we give to children against childhood illnesses of one kind or another, against diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis. We have to boost them several times. We do this for a wide range of vaccine-preventable illnesses. So we're not surprised. Whether another round of vaccination will be required, or even whether we may be looking to the vaccine companies to develop new versions of their vaccines that are better targeted at Omicron. This is, again, one of the things we're going to find out in the coming months. But I think everyone now who's been facing COVID, who is concerned about her or his own health, that of their family and of their community and of their nation, realize that we need to buckle our seatbelts metaphorically and be prepared for unknowns and for a rough ride. So one of the things we need to combat here is a sense of fatigue or desperation on the part of the population, people thinking that with a single dose of a vaccine or even a double round that things are going to be fine, that it'll all be over. I think we have to be prepared to be in this for the long haul and to accept the fact that we still don't know certain things about this virus, how it changes, and we're still improving the arsenal of vaccines and drugs to deal with both preventing infection and minimizing the negative health effects of people who do become infected.
All right, Dr. Robert Hecht, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break with a look at stories from around the world. OPEC Plus votes to continue modest increases. The U.S. government faces a possible shutdown, and South Korea sees a second day of record COVID-19 numbers. We'll have more on these stories and other news from around the world when we come back from break, so stay with us. OPEC and allied oil-producing countries have voted to maintain a pattern of steady, modest monthly increases in oil releases to the rest of the world. That's even as the new COVID-19 Omicron variant is raising concerns about the global economic recovery from the pandemic. A senior oil markets analyst for Rystad Energy says OPEC Plus is ready to wait for more data on the efficacy of current vaccines on Omicron before making any significant changes to its output strategy. The U.S. federal government could be heading for a temporary shutdown. Republicans in Congress are poised to stall a must-pass funding bill. This comes as they force a debate on rolling back the Biden administration's COVID-19 vaccine mandates for some workers. Conservative Republicans in the House and Senate want to take a hardline stand against the mandated vaccinations. Delays could cause a shutdown tomorrow and throughout the weekend. South Korea has broken its daily record for coronavirus infections for a second straight day, with more than 5,200 new cases. The rapid Delta-driven spread comes amid the emergence of the new Omicron variant, which is seen as potentially more contagious than previous strains of the virus. It has fueled concerns about prolonged pandemic suffering. South Korea confirmed its first 5 Omicron cases on Wednesday night. They were linked to arrivals from Nigeria, prompting the government to tighten its border controls. With COVID-19 infections topping 70,000 in the past 24 hours, Germany is going to ban non-vaccinated people from non-essential stores, cultural and recreational venues. And Chancellor Angela Merkel says Parliament will consider a general vaccine mandate. This in light of concerns that hospitals could become overloaded with COVID-19 patients. Almost 69% of Germans are fully vaccinated. The government is aiming for a minimum of 75%. The British and Irish governments are expressing optimism that a thorny spat between the UK and the EU over Northern Ireland trade can be resolved. But Ireland's top diplomats said on Thursday that negotiations are likely to drag on into next year. Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said the talks over post-Brexit rules for Northern Ireland had not produced a breakthrough moment. Speaking after a meeting with UK officials in London, Mr. Coveney said resolving the dispute by the end of the year is a very tall order and unlikely to happen. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has appointed a new Treasury and Finance Minister. This comes after Lutfi Elvan stepped down from the post as the currency has been tumbling to record lows. An announcement published in the official Gazette on Thursday said the president named Deputy Minister Nuruddin Nebati to the post. The Turkish lira has been plummeting to all-time lows. This comes over concerns about the government's economic policy following a series of cuts in borrowing costs despite soaring inflation. The Turkish currency has lost about 40% of its value since the start of the year. The Russian military has deployed coastal defense missile systems near the Pacific Islands, which are also claimed by Japan. And this is seen as a move intended to underline Moscow's firm stance in the dispute. The Bastion systems were moved to Manitoba, a deserted volcanic island in the middle of the Kuril Islands chain. Japan claims 4 southernmost islands. Russia's defense ministry posted a video on Thursday showing missile carriers moving ashore from amphibious landing vessels. They then drove up the coast to take up firing positions as part of the drills. Human Rights Watch says the killing of at least 65 protesters in Myanmar's biggest city on March 14th was pre-planned and premeditated. The group accused security forces of deliberately encircling and using lethal force against crowds in Yangon that were demonstrating against the February 1st coup. The report charges that soldiers and police armed with military assault rifles fired on trapped protesters and on those trying to assist the wounded. Scientists from around the world are flocking to La Palma, one of Spain's Canary Islands in the Atlantic Ocean. They are using cutting-edge new technologies and drones to scrutinize a rare volcanic eruption from land, sea, air, and even space. But predicting volcanic eruptions, and especially how they end, remains a huge challenge. Tel Aviv, Israel, is the most expensive city in the world to live in, according to a research group linked to The Economist magazine. The city jumped from number 5 on the list, vaulting past Paris and Singapore. Canadian cities didn't crack the top 10 list. 6 customers and 24 employees spent the night in an IKEA furniture store in northern Denmark after being stranded. The group was unable to leave after a storm brought in 30 centimeters of snow. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, you can always check out our website in between. Take care.